My brother fabricated photos to convince our landlord I was a hoarder and a property risk. We had lived together for 3 years, but he was quietly signing another lease with his girlfriend while I received a 30-day non-renewal notice. After my recent divorce, losing my home threatened the little stability I had left. I wanted the accusation to be a misunderstanding, so I delayed confronting him. Instead, I checked the files. The photo metadata identified my brother's phone, dated the images 2 weeks before the notice, and placed the staged clutter inside my locked bedroom. I renamed every file by date and result. Clean records, ugly truth. But how could I prove to the landlord that the supposed unsanitary conditions had been orchestrated? I started by preserving what I had before asking anyone for an explanation. The notice, the photo attachments, the original metadata. A video I had taken after deep cleaning the apartment the previous month. I copied everything into a dated, read-only folder. My brother used to joke, roommates are just witnesses with keys. He said it after my divorce, when he moved in and I thanked him too many times for not letting me live alone. Back then, it had sounded cynical, but affectionate. 3 years later, staring at photographs taken inside my locked bedroom, I heard the sentence differently. Someone with a key had manufactured a witness statement. I compared the alleged hoarding photos to my cleaning video room by room. Walls first, floors second, fixed objects last. The common areas in my video matched the landlord's inspection window. Clear hallway, empty kitchen counters, unobstructed vents, no bags, no boxes, no sanitation problem. The clutter photos did not show those spaces. They were framed tightly enough to suggest a larger mess while avoiding anything that would identify the room. But my brother had made mistakes. One photograph caught the edge of his closet trim. Another showed the leg of a chair that had only ever been in his bedroom. A third included the corner of a narrow bookcase he had bought because my wider shelves would not fit beside his window. The mess was real in the limited sense that the objects existed. The location and implication were false. Someone had piled boxes, clothes, old magazines, and trash bags inside his private room, photographed them at angles that made the piles look deeper, then represented them as the condition of our shared apartment and my locked bedroom. I saved the comparisons as R02_clean video compare. It was easier to name the evidence than to name what my brother was doing. The next morning, his closet door was open. Almost nothing remained inside. 2 shirts, 3 empty hangers, a pair of shoes he never wore. When I asked him later, he would call that decluttering. At the time, I said nothing. I photographed the room only from the hallway, then checked the shared recycling and trash because collection day was coming. Under a flattened grocery bag, I found a moving company receipt. It was dated 3 weeks before the landlord's notice. The order details showed packing supplies and a scheduled move window. I photographed it where it lay. I saved the order number and date. Then I put the grocery bag back exactly as I had found it. Taking the receipt would have told him I knew. I did not want him to know yet, although I kept pretending my reason was procedural. Preserve first, confront second. That sounded disciplined. The truth was less flattering. I still wanted one more chance for the evidence to mean less than it did. I compiled every email we had received from the landlord over the previous year. I added maintenance appointments, entry notices, repair confirmations, and inspection records. I built one chronology with 3 columns: claim, source, contradiction. The landlord's notice described serious conditions discovered during a random inspection. The lease file contained no warning before that. No failed inspection, no cleanliness complaint, no request to correct a violation, no maintenance worker reporting blocked access or unsafe conditions. There was normal correspondence, then silence, then one sudden co-tenant report, then non-renewal. The maintenance logs made the random inspection claim worse. No employee or contractor had entered near the complaint date. The last maintenance visit had occurred weeks earlier for a repair unrelated to cleanliness, and the completion note said access had been clear. I marked the claimed inspection as false. Then I requested the original complaint package. I did not accuse my brother. I wrote that I was disputing the factual basis for the non-renewal and needed the original email, attachments, headers, inspection notes, and identification of anyone who had entered the unit. The landlord did not send them immediately. Instead, I received a short reply saying the decision was based on credible photographic evidence supplied by a co-tenant. A co-tenant. There were only two of us. That evening, I found my brother in the kitchen sealing a box. He saw me looking and placed his palm over the top, as if the cardboard contained state secrets. "Old clothes," he said. I had not asked. I nodded and went to my room. My phone showed a voicemail from him. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. No message notification from earlier. No deliberate call I remembered missing. He had pocket dialed me. At first, the recording was fabric noise and distant movement. Then his girlfriend's voice came through. I could not make out every word, but I heard my name. I turned up the volume. My brother laughed. He believes the landlord just randomly inspected. His girlfriend said something too quiet to understand. "He's making folders," my brother said. "That's what he does. He thinks if he labels everything, it stops being a disaster." They both laughed. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand until the message ended. Then I played that part again. Not because I had missed it, because some injuries arrive in language so ordinary that your brain keeps checking whether it was really meant to cut you. I saved the voicemail in 2 encrypted locations. I did not answer him. I did not walk into the kitchen. I did not send it to the landlord. A compressed legal consultation the next day confirmed my caution. Our state's 2-party consent rules were complicated enough that relying on an accidental recording could create an admissibility fight and make the dispute look like a family surveillance feud. Even if I had done nothing to cause the recording, the voicemail could distract from cleaner evidence. The fastest weapon I had was also the one most likely to damage my credibility. My brother's move was 2 weeks away. My non-renewal deadline kept shrinking. I excluded the voicemail from the landlord file and named that decision too. Private only, do not submit. Then I kept working. A day later, I asked him about the empty closet. Nothing else. No accusation, no mention of the receipt. He did not even look up from his phone. I'm decluttering. That much? I've been meaning to do it. I waited. He filled the silence for me. Honestly, after that random inspection went so badly, we should both be cutting down on stuff. There it was. The exact lie from the complaint, spoken voluntarily, by the person laughing because I believed it. I could have confronted him then. Instead, I said, "That makes sense." It did not make sense. I wanted to see whether he would stop lying if I gave him room. He used the room to lie more comfortably. The next piece appeared in the shared printer's scan tray. I did not search his computer, phone, email, or private accounts. I did not need to. He had scanned a signed copy of a lease application and left the paper behind. It named his girlfriend's apartment complex. Under reason for vacating, he had written lease non-renewal. The application was dated 2 months before I received the notice. I preserved the scan history and the copy. That became R06 second lease application. I stared at the dates until the sequence stopped being deniable. He had not decided to leave because the landlord refused to renew us. He had told another complex that non-renewal was already happening before our landlord had supposedly made the decision. The non-renewal was not the cause of his move. It was the cover for it. He wanted to live with his girlfriend. That part by itself was normal. Adults move, relationships change. 3 years was a long time to share an apartment with a brother rebuilding himself after a divorce. But he had wanted an exit that made him look acted upon instead of responsible. If the landlord forced us out, then he had not abandoned me. He had simply found another place. Efficient, regrettable, nobody's fault. Except he had needed to create the crisis that justified the exit. I sat in my bedroom, surrounded by labeled folders, and finally noticed the last moving box from my divorce. It was still sealed beside the wall. 3 years in the apartment, and I had never opened it. I had treated this home as a pause in my life. I paid rent, cleaned, documented repairs, and kept everything orderly. But I had not asked what my brother wanted after the emergency passed. I had not asked whether he still saw us as two adults sharing expenses or as one adult quietly assigned to monitor the other. That was my failure. It did not make fabricated evidence less fabricated. Clean records could expose the mechanism. They could not explain the emotional rot that made the mechanism possible. The landlord finally responded to my dispute. I sent the cleaning video and maintenance chronology with a narrowly framed request: original headers, original attachments, and the stated basis for the alleged inspection. The answer was blunt. The deadline would remain active unless I could disprove the co-tenant report's source and content. Then the landlord released the complaint package. The original email chain described the photos as resulting from a random inspection. There was no inspector named, no maintenance worker, no entry record, no separate witness. The attachments were unaltered originals, and the forwarding headers were intact. I verified and preserved them before adding annotations. The photos carried the same device information I had already found. The sending header contained the originating internet address and the exact time the complaint had been submitted. That gave me one last path. I retained home network logs because our connection had become unstable the year before, and I had set the router to keep diagnostic records. I exported the full segment around the complaint time, not just the line I wanted. The public address in the email header matched the address assigned to our apartment's connection. At the exact send time, the router showed my brother's laptop active. His device identifier had retained the same local assignment for months. My own computer and phone were disconnected during that interval. An internet address alone could have identified the apartment, not the person. The surrounding router entries narrowed it further. His laptop connected. The complaint left through our network. The timestamp matched. My devices were absent. I named that file R08IP correlation. Then I put the sequence in order. 2 months before the notice, my brother's outside lease application predicted non-renewal. 3 weeks before the notice, the moving receipt scheduled his departure. 2 weeks before the notice, his phone photographed staged clutter inside his room. His laptop sent the complaint through our home network using false random inspection language. The maintenance logs showed no inspection. Then the landlord issued the notice. There was no innocent gap left. Tenant aide reviewed the chain and told me the documents could carry the dispute without the voicemail. The audio was emotionally conclusive, but procedurally unnecessary. Submitting it risked turning a records case into an argument about recording law. So I gave up the receipt that hurt most. I grouped the evidence by proposition instead of burying the landlord in everything I had collected. Staging, sender, pre-planning, false inspection claim. I included immutable copies, file hashes, source notes, and a short chronology. I named the folder Landlord Packet Final, no VM. The final version became R09 Decisive Packet. Then I stopped. That was harder than it sounds. Documentation had become a way to avoid being in the same apartment as my brother. There was always another timestamp I could verify, another copy I could preserve, another file name I could improve. Investigation let me postpone grief by calling it incomplete work. But the method question was closed. I knew what he had done. I knew how he had done it. I knew why the notice existed. I submitted the packet and received confirmation that the landlord would review it before the deadline. A decision meeting was scheduled while the notice remained active. Only after the evidence was outside my brother's reach did I tell him we needed to talk. He came home carrying takeout and stopped when he saw the dining table. I had cleared it except for 3 pages: the chronology, the outside lease application, and the landlord's complaint header. He looked at the papers. Then he looked toward the hallway, probably checking whether his boxes had been disturbed. "I didn't go into your devices," I said. "I didn't need to." "What is this?" "Your application says non-renewal 2 months before the notice. The staged photos came from your phone. The complaint came through your laptop. There was no random inspection. He put the takeout bag down carefully. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You've lost your mind." I had prepared for denial. I had not prepared for how tired it would sound. I slid the chronology toward him. Which date is wrong? I'm not doing this. Which source is wrong? You made a whole case file on me. Yes. That's insane. Yes, I said, it is insane that I needed one. He pushed the paper away. You don't know what happened. I know enough to stop the notice. I want to hear why. He paced once to the kitchen and back. He said the photos were not fake because the clutter had physically existed. I said location and representation mattered. He said the apartment had been stressful. I said there had been no complaint before his outside lease application. Each excuse survived for less time than the one before it. Finally, he asked, "Did you record me?" I took out my phone and played the voicemail. He believes the landlord just randomly inspected. His own laughter filled the room. I stopped it there. His face changed, not into guilt, into anger that I possessed something he could not reframe. You listened to a pocket call? You left me a voicemail. You saved it. Yes. Of course you did. I let that land. He had meant it as an accusation, and some part of it was true. Of course I had saved it. I saved everything because I did not trust memory to remain stable once someone I loved began correcting it. I said, the landlord won't receive the voicemail. The documents are enough. That was when he stopped denying the plan. He said his girlfriend had asked him to move in months ago. He wanted to go. He had wanted to go before that. But every time he imagined telling me, he saw me after the divorce, awake at 4 a.m, sitting on the kitchen floor because the bedroom felt too quiet, asking him whether I had ruined my whole life. You leaned on me for everything, he said. Then you turned it into a system. Grocery list, cleaning schedule, rent reminders, maintenance folders. I couldn't change a light bulb without it becoming a dated record. I never asked you to stay forever. You never had to. You made leaving feel like signing an incident report. That hurt because it contained truth. For 3 years, he had carried resentment I had mistaken for reliability. I had treated every practical contribution as proof that we were functioning. Rent paid, chores completed, problems corrected. No missed deadlines, no open violations, no indication that the relationship itself had failed inspection. He said he had become my caretaker without agreeing to it. He said his girlfriend believed he would never leave unless something forced the decision. The landlord notice was supposed to create a clean break. We would both have to move. He would go with her. I would find somewhere smaller. You could have made me homeless, I said. You would have figured it out. With 30 days. You always figure things out. That isn't the same as being safe. He looked away. I listened without interrupting after that. I let him say all of it. That living with me felt like living beside a man who processed pain into spreadsheets. That I had never really recovered from the divorce, just organized around the crater. That he had been afraid if he told me he was leaving, I would collapse and make him responsible for putting me back together. I could have defended myself point by point. Instead, when he finished, I said, "Write a retraction." He stared at me. Tell the landlord the photos were staged in your room. There was no inspection and the report was inaccurate. You don't have to say why. You don't have to apologize. Retract it. He gave a short, disbelieving laugh. That's what you got from everything I just said? I heard everything you said. No, you documented it. I'm asking you to correct the thing that can remove me from my home. And then what? You keep this apartment and I'm the villain in your permanent archives? You fabricated evidence. You use documentation like a leash, Nathaniel. You call it proof, but it's just another way to make people responsible for keeping you stable. I felt myself reaching for precision, because precision was safer than rage. A retraction is not a leash. I'm not writing one. The landlord already has the packet. His face went still. You sent it before talking to me? Yes. So this wasn't a conversation. No, I said. The conversation was 3 years late. The packet was on time. He told me to withdraw it. I refused. He said if I continued the case, he would move out and never speak to me again. The threat worked. I want to be honest about that. For one ugly second, I considered sacrificing the apartment just to prevent the sentence from becoming real. I imagined withdrawing the dispute, packing under deadline, telling myself I had chosen family over housing. But that would not have preserved a relationship. It would have preserved his version of events. I said, the landlord will not receive the voicemail. I won't ask for punishment, but I will not protect the lie. He picked up the takeout bag and walked to his room. The next morning, he began moving out. He submitted a bare denial to the landlord. He claimed my conclusions were speculative and that he had reported legitimate concerns. He did not explain the false inspection language, the metadata, the timing of his lease application, or the network records. He refused to attend the decision review. I attended alone. The landlord had the lease file open beside my packet. The notice was still active. I knew that because I had checked twice before the meeting, as if the deadline might become less real when refreshed. The landlord tested the evidence one piece at a time. How do you know these photographs were taken in his bedroom? I pointed to the fixed trim, the room-specific furniture, and the comparison frames from the cleaning video. How do you know he sent the email? I explained the original header, the apartment's public address, the router segment, the laptop assignment, and the absence of my devices during the send interval. Could someone else have used his computer? Possibly, in isolation, but the device record is not isolated. His phone created the attachments. His outside application predicted non-renewal. His moving receipt predated the notice. There was no maintenance entry or inspection. I did not mention the voicemail. I wanted to. Every time the landlord paused, I felt the audio sitting in my private folder like a flare gun. One click and the laughter would fill the room. One click and nobody could pretend this was a misunderstanding. I left it unused. The landlord asked whether my brother had retracted the complaint. No. Has he admitted staging the photographs? Not in writing. Then he denies your interpretation. He denies the conclusion. He has not supplied a competing chronology. That was the cleanest sentence I said all day. Then the meeting shifted from whether the report was false to whether I could remain in the apartment alone. The rent would be higher under a solo renewal. I had to qualify without my brother's income. The landlord treated affordability as a separate question, which was fair and terrifying. Disproving sabotage did not create money. I submitted what I had: income records, budget, payment history, proof that rent had never been late. I answered in dates and source files because that was the language I trusted myself to speak without breaking. The landlord said the notice would remain active while the file was reviewed. I went home to an apartment half emptied of my brother. His bedroom door stood open. The staged clutter was gone. So was almost everything else. For 2 days, there was no decision. On the third, the landlord called. The original headers, metadata, maintenance logs, and predated outside application made my brother's denial untenable. The false report would not be used to remove me. I was offered a solo renewal, subject to the higher rent and my brother's removal from the lease. I accepted. I did not ask the landlord to penalize him beyond correcting the effect of the lie. I did not submit the voicemail. I did not request some official declaration that I had been the better brother. I signed the corrected lease because I needed a home more than I needed a verdict on our childhood. The new rent was barely affordable. I cut the budget until every category looked hungry. The second bedroom remained empty because I could not afford to furnish it, and because I did not yet know how to enter that room without mentally labeling every surface as evidence. My brother's name disappeared from the lease. His key disappeared from the hook by the door. Then, without a goodbye, he disappeared from the household. The betrayal could no longer continue. The notice had lost its force. I was housed. On paper, that was the outcome I had fought for. For a while, the apartment sounded like abandonment. Then one night, I carried the last sealed box from my divorce into the empty bedroom. 3 years late, I opened it. Inside were photographs, books, and the small, ordinary pieces of a life I had packed away because looking at them felt less manageable than storing them. I chose one photograph that belonged only to me, not to my marriage, not to my brother, not to a dispute. I hung it on the wall. The room stayed mostly empty. I let it. Under the new solo lease, I changed the locks. When the locksmith handed me the keys, I remembered my brother saying, "Roommates are just witnesses with keys." I stood in the empty room, beneath my own photograph, and whispered, "No more witnesses."